ex-wife reveals my daughter isn't mine but wants me to keep paying child support. I laughed and told her to get a lawyer ASAP. I'm here on Reddit today because I'm speechless. My ex-wife, Jane, and I divorced 3 years ago. Looking back, the reason for our split is pretty clear. Jane and I just weren't compatible as a couple. It became obvious we had very different ideas about what marriage should be. Jane wanted an open marriage, the freedom to explore friendships with other people while still married to me. I, on the other hand, believed in commitment and exclusivity. I thought marriage meant being with one person, through thick and thin. It wasn't something I could compromise on, and that's where the trouble started. Though the tipping point was Jane's birthday party. It's one of those moments you'll never forget. I was expecting us to celebrate her birthday, but I ended up getting publicly ambushed. Jane had invited some of her friends over, who, it turned out, were there to pressure and convince me to let Jane sleep with other people. During the party, some of them cornered me and started lecturing me about how I was handling my marriage. They accused me of being controlling and sexist, just because I wasn't okay with Jane's desire to sleep with other men. One of them even called me a prude, like it was some kind of insult. The thing that hurt the most wasn't just what they said, it was that Jane had clearly put them up to it. Like she wanted to shame me into agreeing to her desires. To make things worse, we had a young son at the time. Jane was already a mother, but she was obsessed with the idea of experimenting with other men. That was the moment I realized we were completely on different pages about what mattered in life. After the fiasco of Jane's birthday party, I decided I couldn't let things continue the way they were. Later that night, I sat down with her and made it clear, if she was really that desperate for an open marriage, then it was time to give her a marriage so open it would break, a divorce. That wasn't what Jane wanted though, and she started arguing with me. She brought our son into the argument, saying a divorce would affect him. She even quoted studies about children of divorced parents having more problems in life. I told her that I didn't have any studies about how opening up your marriage affects children, but I didn't need them because I was fully convinced it was only going to bring trouble. That's when the aggressive Jane came out. She started making threats, saying that if I divorced her, she'd make sure to turn our son against me. She implied that she would manipulate him into believing I was the villain who hurt and abandoned her. If the idea of opening our marriage wasn't enough to think about a divorce, that last bit made it very clear I couldn't be with this woman. I wasn't afraid of her threats though. I'd always had a strong bond with my son, and I knew I had been a good father to him. We spent plenty of quality time together, and he knew how much I cared. I was confident that regardless of what Jane tried to tell him, he'd see through it eventually. I believed in the strength of our relationship, and I wasn't going to let fear of her manipulation stop me from doing what I knew was right for me and ultimately, our family. So, I filed for divorce a short time after that. Just 2 weeks after filing, something unexpected happened. We found out Jane was pregnant. This was the news that complicated everything. It hadn't even occurred to me that this could happen, but when I thought about it, it made sense. Even though our relationship was falling apart, we'd still been intimate occasionally until the big fight at her birthday party. I didn't question whether the baby was mine. It never occurred to me to doubt it because Jane up to that point had only insisted on an open marriage but had never really shown any red flags. No hiding her phone, no strange nights out, nothing. Jane, for her part, was quick to assure me that the baby was definitely mine. She seemed almost happy about the situation, figuring everything would change and I'd call off the divorce. She was acting like this baby was going to magically fix our broken relationship, like it obligated me to stay with her. But I quickly made it clear that wasn't going to happen. I told her plainly that while I would always be a present father to my children and fulfill my responsibilities, including child support, I had no interest in staying married to her. Her pregnancy didn't change the course of the divorce, it was staying because our relationship was already broken. Jane didn't take the divorce well at all. She made multiple scenes and made things as difficult as possible during the first 3 months after our separation. While staying at her parents' house, she was incredibly hostile towards me. She did everything she could to make things difficult, especially when it came to our son. She tried to keep me away from him, using every excuse she could to avoid letting me see him. It was a rough period, but eventually, the courts intervened and formalized custody arrangements. We were granted joint custody, allowing me to spend as much time with my son as she did. Once the divorce was finalized, I was finally free of Jane. I felt like I could breathe again. I could focus on rebuilding my life, putting more energy into my work, and finding some normalcy. Meanwhile, Jane started dating a new guy, Milo, while she was pregnant with my child. The day our baby was born, she refused to let me into the delivery room. Instead, Milo was the only person allowed by her side. I can't even begin to describe how much that hurt. No matter what had happened between Jane and me, I still cared deeply about being present for such an important moment, but she completely shut me out. Regardless, after the baby was born, I followed the court orders and began paying child support for both my son and my new daughter. Despite everything, I was determined to provide for my kids and be an active father in their lives. In the meantime, Jane's relationship with Milo seemed to progress at an astonishing speed. Just a few months after our divorce was finalized, they got married. I'll admit, I was surprised by how quickly it all happened, especially since Jane had just had a baby, but at the end of the day, it wasn't my business. For the past 2 years, Jane and I have maintained fairly minimal communication, and honestly, it's been for the best. We only communicate through a co-parenting app, and even then, it's strictly about the logistical aspects of our parental responsibilities. Aside from that, we've basically stayed out of each other's lives. I hired a nanny specifically to handle the pickups and drop-offs for our kids when it's time to go to Jane's or come back to mine. The nanny takes care of all that. That way, I don't have to see Jane at all, which keeps things peaceful. One thing I should mention is that, throughout all of this, my son has repeatedly complained about how he and his little sister are treated by Jane and her husband, Milo. He's told me that it seems like they favor his sister over him. According to him, Jane and Milo put more effort into treating our daughter better. They buy her more expensive gifts, they are more willing to do what she asks, and they are more attentive to her needs. Meanwhile, my son is treated differently, like he doesn't matter as much. On a couple of occasions, I tried to address this issue with Jane. I approached her calmly, hoping she would make things better for my son, but every time I bring it up, she shuts down the conversation. She'd either flatly deny it or brush me off by saying I was exaggerating, that my son was overthinking things. Since I haven't been able to get through to her, I've done what I can to compensate on my end. When my son is with me, I make an effort to ensure I am twice the parent to him. I try to not spoil him, so I try to avoid buying material things such as a special toy, but I do make the attempt of being a present dad. A few examples are that I'll free up entire days to do his favorite activity or to just spend time together. I make sure he knows that I love and appreciate him. I also make sure not to neglect my daughter. After all, she's just a little girl, and she's not to blame for any of this. But I do strive to make up for what my son feels is lacking when he's at Jane's. Now, to what happened recently. Last week, I received a call from Jane. This is rare because we hardly ever spoke on the phone, much less call each other directly. When I answered, she told me that her husband, Milo, had been in a terrible car accident and was rushed to the hospital. She asked if I could go pick up the kids so she could focus on being there with him, and I immediately agreed. I quickly went to get the kids, and Jane headed straight to the hospital. 3 hours later, we received the news that Milo had succumbed to his injuries and passed away. I offered my condolences and assured her that I would take care of the kids, so she could have the time and space she needed to grieve. For the next few days, I kept the kids with me, doing my best to keep things as normal and comforting for them as possible. This week, Jane contacted me again. She said she wanted to talk. I figured she was still grieving and might need some support with the kids, So earlier today I went over to her house with the kids. They were excited to see their mom after spending the week with me. Our son, being older, understands what happened with Milo. Our daughter, on the other hand, is still too young to grasp that kind of thing. When we arrived, Jane greeted the kids warmly. I could see how much she had missed them. Afterward, she asked me to step outside so we could talk privately, while the kids stayed inside playing. As we stepped out onto the porch, I noticed Jane seemed different, nervous, almost hesitant. She was shifting from foot to foot, like she didn't know how to begin. Finally, she took a deep breath and started talking. She told me that she had something important to share, something she'd kept hidden for a long time. She described it as a secret that had been weighing on her. I stayed silent while she continued rambling about how she wished she had told me this sooner, saying she felt even more guilty now after Milo's death. She said the weight of this secret had always been suffocating her, and she couldn't live with it anymore. Finally, I was getting a little tired of waiting, so I asked her directly what she meant. And that's when she confessed, I wasn't my daughter's biological father. I was still processing the information, but she didn't stop there. Jane went on to explain that Milo hadn't been some stranger she met after our divorce, like I had believed. Instead, she admitted that she had been having an affair with him for a long time. Even that she had kept it hidden because she didn't want me to divorce her. Jane told me that, back then, she didn't have the courage to leave me. She said she was more focused on the stability I provided, which is why she wanted an open marriage so she could have the best of both worlds. However, when I finally divorced her, there was no longer any point in hiding her and Milo anymore, which is why they got together so quickly after our separation. Jane then revealed the part that stung the most. She told me that when she discovered she was pregnant, she knew there was a 50% chance the baby wasn't mine. Despite that, she prayed the child would be mine, so she could get child support from me. She clung to that hope because it was easier than facing the reality of her actions. After our daughter was born, she said she hadn't doubted for a second that I was the father, at least not at first. But as our daughter grew older, Jane started noticing certain traits and characteristics that were very similar to Milo's. Those similarities plagued her until she couldn't ignore them anymore. Eventually, she and Milo decided to get a DNA test behind my back. When the results came in, they confirmed what she'd feared but kept hidden. My daughter wasn't biologically mine. She was Milo's child. For years, I had embraced my daughter, comforted her, nurtured her, and poured my heart into being the best father I could be. And now she was telling me she wasn't even my biological child. But it wasn't just about biology. For years, I'd been paying child support, thinking I was fulfilling my duty as a father. I'd been supporting Jane and Milo's household, unknowingly funding the very relationship that betrayed me. And now, after all that, this was how I found out. Jane kept talking like she was trying to justify her actions. She admitted that she had wanted to confess sooner, but by then, our daughter already saw me as her father. She claimed she didn't want to break our hearts, mine and my daughter's. She said her own family would have looked down on her if they discovered the truth, that she had cheated on me and had children with 2 different men. According to her, it was easier to let everyone believe both kids were mine. She figured her excuses would make me feel better, but they weren't doing any of that. That's why I snapped at her when I told her what she had done to me was one of the most cruel and inhumane things someone could do. She'd robbed me of the truth. She'd robbed me of years of my life where I lived under false pretenses, and there's no way I'd feel sympathy for her now. She also tried to argue, saying it had been difficult for her, too. She claimed that keeping this secret had been a heavy burden, that it wasn't easy shielding me from the truth. I looked her in the eye and told her I didn't care about the cheating. I didn't care that she'd been unfaithful. It was the years of lies that followed. It was the fact that I had been led to believe my daughter was mine when she wasn't. It was the fact that I had built my life, my love, and my fatherhood on a foundation of lies. I told her, had she told me the truth then, when it happened, Maybe I could have forgiven her and moved on with my life. It wasn't going to stop the divorce, but I wouldn't have cared about any of that because the marriage was over anyway. But now, it had all snowballed into something huge. I told her we had nothing more to talk about, and that I was getting a lawyer to sort this out. She gave me a strange look and asked, "Why would you need to contact a lawyer?" I looked at her straight on and told her the truth she didn't want to hear. There's no way in hell I'm going to keep paying child support for a kid that's not mine. Jane said we should calm down and try to think things through. She said, "You can't just refuse to pay child support. You've been her father all these years. You've raised her. You've loved her. How can you just walk away from that?" She'd lied to me for years, manipulated me into supporting her and Milo's daughter, and now she was trying to guilt me into continuing to pay. Jane kept saying things that infuriated me more and more. "This isn't about you or me. It's about our daughter. It would be cruel to just abandon her like that." Right, our daughter. But 10 minutes ago she confessed she wasn't mine and that she used her to get money from me. Did she even care about this little girl? But Jane didn't stop. She revealed that the only reason she confessed the truth now was because Milo was gone. She said, "I wanted you to know the truth, but that doesn't mean I want you to stop being her dad. She loves you. You love her. Why does biology matter now?" I couldn't help but scoff at her sense of entitlement. The absurdity of her reasoning stunned me. I told her she needed to find a lawyer ASAP, because I was going to take her to court over this. She tried to argue, saying I was ruining everything, and that her daughter needed my money every month, especially now that she was a widow with no job to support her 2 kids. "That's not my problem. You and Milo made this mess. Now you'll clean it up alone because the other idiot has gotten off so easily." Yeah, I didn't care about attacking a deceased person at all. That didn't clear him of being as guilty as Jane. She pleaded again, but I had no more sympathy to offer. I didn't waste another second at Jane's house. I picked up my son. My daughter was asleep and I left her with her mom, and said a quick goodbye to Jane. Jane was crying, standing by the door, begging me not to leave things like this. Jane, clearly panicking, has been texting me non-stop ever since. She's begging me to think of her daughter, to not abandon her and destroy her world with my selfish decision. She's pleading with me to not get a lawyer. She reminds me how devastating it will be for her daughter to find out that not only is Milo, her biological father, dead, but the man she'd always called dad isn't her real father either. I feel sick. The thought of seeing her or my daughter right now feels unbearable. I feel like the bad guy for what's happening to my daughter, who I don't know what to call her now, but on the other hand it's a very complex situation. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. Update 1. I completely agree with the comments saying Jane was only trying to get me to keep paying child support for her and Milo's daughter even though they both knew the truth all along. Now, Jane is trying to act like she's entitled to have everything stay the same, but I can't let that happen. I feel absolutely devastated. There's this overwhelming mix of anger, confusion, and sadness that I can't quite process. I know people might call me the jerk for not accepting Jane's daughter as my own after what I've learned. Do I love her? She's been a huge part of my life. I feel completely betrayed. For years, I've raised her, cared for her, and given her everything she could have wanted. I've loved her as my own, and now finding out she isn't even mine, it's like I've been living a lie this whole time. I feel like a fool. I feel betrayed, like everything I thought was real has crumbled. How can I just act like nothing happened after all this? How am I supposed to look at her and keep pretending to be her dad? Right now, Jane still has her daughter at her house. I don't know how much she can comprehend about the situation, being only 2 years old. And knowing Jane, she probably expects me to just change my mind and accept her daughter as my own, as if everything's fine. But I can't do that. I can't. If that makes me feel bad, honestly, I hate the situation I'm in. I hate having to deal with this. And I hate everything Jane has caused by being selfish. At this point, I plan to sit down with a lawyer soon to discuss my options. I need to figure out what my next steps are, what's best for me and my son. Only after talking to a lawyer will I be able to talk to my son about this. He deserves to know the truth, and I need to figure out how to explain all of this to him without making the situation worse. I need time. Update 2. Thank you so much for all your well wishes and advice over the past 2 weeks. After everything that's happened, I finally made the decision to hire a lawyer. It wasn't easy, both financially and emotionally, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to fight for my rights. The lawyer I hired has experience with cases like mine, where fathers are tricked by their wives, who use the father's name on the birth certificate just to secure child support in divorce cases. Unfortunately, my case isn't unique, and this happens more often than most people realize. It's truly heartbreaking to know that someone would be willing to go to such lengths to manipulate another person, especially when children are involved. My lawyer explained that since I had already filed for divorce when my ex-wife got pregnant, there's a good chance I could win this case. The timing might work in my favor, and that's a small comfort in this overwhelming situation. At this point, we have 2 main actions to focus on. First, we're going to file a motion to have my name removed from the birth certificate. It's a complicated process, but I'm hopeful it can be done. Second, we're going to file a paternity fraud lawsuit. I'm sure a paternity test will be ordered in court, and if the test results prove that my daughter isn't biologically mine, then we'll continue to fight for what's fair. As it is, my lawyer says this will require a lot of effort, and we need to be patient. At the same time, when all of this started, I also got a paternity test done with my son. I didn't want to mention it before because I didn't want to dwell on it too much. But with the results in and feeling somewhat better, I can tell you that my son is biologically mine. Update 3. Honestly, one of the hardest parts of all this has been sitting down and talking to my son about everything that's been happening. He could sense something wasn't right and had been asking me why his sister hadn't come back with us. I didn't want to hide anything from him, but I also didn't want to hurt him unnecessarily. So, I sat him down and explained things in the simplest way I could. I told him there's a chance his sister may not be biologically my daughter. I needed him to know that even though things weren't what they seemed, my love for him would never change. When I told him this, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that broke my heart. He told me that now he understood why Jane and Milo always treated his sister like she was special and gave her more attention and love. He said he'd always felt like he wasn't enough, and now it all made sense to him. I hugged him tight and reassured him that I loved him more than anything, and that no matter what happened, he would always have me. As for my ex-wife, she's been relentless in trying to contact me. She's been trying to guilt-trip me, saying how much her daughter misses me and what a terrible father I am for abandoning her. She's telling me her daughter shouldn't grow up without a father figure, and she's pressuring me to just put my feelings aside and continue accepting her daughter as my own. I haven't responded to any of her messages, per my lawyer's advice. Everything she said, I've been carefully documenting. I'm making sure to keep a record of everything for the court case. The truth is already out there. Both my family and Jane's family have learned about what's been going on. I knew I couldn't keep this secret any longer because if I didn't speak up, Jane would eventually spin the situation and somehow make me look like the villain in all this. I'm not going to let her manipulate the narrative anymore, especially when I've been the one who's been lied to and deceived all these years. First, I contacted Jane's parents. They've always been kind to me, and we've maintained contact even after my divorce from Jane. When I told them the truth, they were devastated, just like me. Jane's father, in particular, was furious when he learned how she'd tricked me. He completely agreed with me that I shouldn't be responsible for paying child support for a child that isn't mine. It felt like a small relief at least to know someone in her family understood how wrong this situation was and defended me. On the other hand, my own parents have a very different perspective. My mom, especially, is pressuring me to accept Jane's daughter as my own. She's comparing this situation to adoption, and telling me I should think of Jane's daughter as an adopted child. She's arguing that since I've already had a fatherly role in that little girl's life, I should continue to be a part of her family. But the thing is, with adoption, you know exactly what you're getting into. In my case, I was tricked. I was led to believe Jane's daughter was my biological child, and I spent years raising and supporting her, all the while believing she was mine. And now finding out she's not feels like a huge betrayal, not just to me, but to my son, too. It's not the same as adopting a child. I understand she doesn't want to see a child hurt or feel rejected. But as of right now, I also have to think about what's best for me and my son, too. For now, the legal process is proceeding as expected, and I just have to sit and wait. Don't expect any update on my case until then. Update 5. First, I want to start by talking about my daughter. I'm still calling her that because I think it's easier for all of you to understand. When I get comments about how I should continue being her father, because it would be too hard on her, I get it. But I feel like I have to respond with the same thing every time, so it's better to make a general response with what I think and the conclusion I've reached. Seeing her right now still triggers a lot of conflicting emotions for me, which makes this decision hard. My decision is to not be that girl's father for many reasons. For starters, she is only 2 years old, so from what I've researched, it's unlikely that she'll remember me, since it's very difficult to remember anything from that age. I can't. It's the best time to do it because sooner or later she will forget about me like she forgets about a toy. It's painful, I won't deny that, but there are more reasons to do it. Jane will always have the trump card that I'm not the biological father, which, according to my lawyer, put me at a disadvantage in the future. She could use it to take custody away from me whenever she wants, and I would have to fight in court for years to see her. If tomorrow Jane meets another man and wants to obtain full custody or take her away, there wouldn't be much I could do. Any other scenario, like adopting her, would be just as difficult for everyone. Her mother has been difficult this entire time, and I don't want to involve any more children in this dynamic. That's why I think doing this now is easier for everyone, except for my ex, who would want to keep getting my money. I've read comments trying to make me look like the villain here, like my ex-wife did. That's why I wonder why those people don't accuse the real villain of the story, which is my ex. She's caused all of this for her own selfish reasons, while I'm here trying to find the least bad solution of all. It's not ideal, but I don't think there's a better solution than this. In part, they remind me of my ex's friends, who wanted me to accept an open marriage regardless of what I wanted. Now, if we talk about the legal processes, both have ended favorably. I've been able to remove my name from the birth certificate and I've also won the lawsuit against my ex for paternity fraud. This means my ex-wife has paid me a sum, which I prefer not to disclose, for her little white lie, as she has sometimes called it. And no, she will not be running out of money anytime soon. She still receives child support from me for our son, and life insurance from her ex. We're continuing with our arrangement where a nanny picks up my son from her house and takes him back. Right now, I prefer to have even less contact with her than necessary. Edit. I don't understand people asking if my son is mine or not. I already answered that in another update.